Welcome back to Cosy Rosie Crochet and of course square number 4 of the Hodgepodge blanket crochet along. Very excited to have you here with me today as we work on one of my favourite stitches. Today's featured stitch is the iris stitch. I love this stitch. It's really simple to make. You're just literally repeating yourself for the total number of rows required, and it makes a really beautiful stretchy material as well, as you can see. Now before we get started, I hope that you've already subscribed, and if you haven't, hit the subscribe button, but don't forget to hit the notification bell. That notification bell will tell you the second that a new crochet square is available in both the Hodgepodge blanket crochet along and any of my other crochet tutorials as well. Don't forget that in the description box below you'll also find a link to the written pattern as well as the roundup of all 30 squares that are being featured in this event. So let's find out the materials we need to make the iris stitch square. So the materials that we're going to need for our iris stitch square is again going to be some Aran weight or worsted weight acrylic yarn. Of course I'm using my favourite PaintBox Yarns Simply Aran, and you're going to need probably about 55 maybe 60 metres in total. This is a size 4 yarn and is 100% acrylic. Now this shade number is 250 and it is known as bubblegum pink, which is why it's so lovely and pink. One of my absolute favourite shades, it really is. I'm using the corresponding hook size that's recommended for the yarn, which is a 5mm hook. Got my fabulous Fells hook here, and we're going to also need, of course, a darning needle because we're not waiting on weaving those ends, we're doing them today. We're also going to need a pair of scissors just to snip off that yarn at the end. So gather all those materials and let's get started. We are going to start by making a slip knot. Once again, this one is worked in rows. So we're going to make a starting chain. And the chain for this 8-inch square is going to be a chain of 27. So to chain, we yarn over the hook and bring that through the loop to create our chains. And we need a total of 27 chains. So go ahead and make your chain of 27 and I'll see you in a moment. So once we have our chain of 27, we're going to start by working into the 5th chain from hook, going straight into making the iris stitch. Iris. Feel like I'm saying the word Irish, but I mean iris. So remembering that this loop on our hook does not count, we're going to find that 5th chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's number 5. We're going to yarn over the hook and insert our hook underneath that top loop of that 5th chain. We're going to yarn over and work a US double crochet, and then place a second US double crochet. We then chain 1 and we're going to work back into that same chain again, working 2 further US double crochets. So that's the same as a UK treble crochet. And this is the iris stitch here. So you've got 2 double crochets, a chain 1 and a further 2 double crochets. We're then going to skip 3 chains. So 1, 2 and 3. There's the 4th one we're going to work into. So we're going to yarn over 1, 2, 3 and insert our hook and work another iris stitch. So we work 2 double crochets into the same chain. We chain 1 and then we're working a further 2 double crochets all into the same chain. And now we have 2. We're going to repeat this the whole way along our chain. So we skip the next 3 chains, so 1, 2 and 3, and in that 4th one we're going to yarn over and work 2 double crochets, our chain 1 and a further 2 double crochets all into that same chain. We're going to repeat that skip 3 and then the iris stitch all the way down to the last 2 chains, and that's where I'm going to meet you. So continue skipping 3 chains, working that iris stitch, and then continuing all the way down until you just have 2 chains remaining, and I will meet you there. So I've now got 6 of these iris stitches, and I've got my chain 4 that we initially skipped, which does count as a double crochet. So to finish this row, we're simply going to skip that second from last chain and then work 1 double crochet into that last chain. You should have 1 double crochet at each end and 6 iris stitches. Going into row 2, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2 and 3 to turn our work. And we're then going to work into these chain 1 spaces in between. So this is very similar to the blossom stitch, except that we don't have to do those single crochets this time. We're just going to work our iris stitch on top of our iris stitches into that chain 1 space. So we're going to yarn over and work those 2 double crochets, a chain 1, a chain 1 and a further 2 double crochets into that same chain 1 space. So they're literally stacking up on top of each other. And we just continue to repeat that the whole way down. So we work an iris stitch into the chain 1 space of the iris stitch of the row before, or into that chain 1 space. It's the same thing. So we're going to repeat that all the way down. We're going to work our last one in here, and I'll meet you to work our last stitch. So at the end of row 2, we have our 6 iris stitches again, and we're just going to work into the top of that chain 4 that we made, working 1 double crochet. And that completes our row. Now we're going to repeat row 2 that we've just worked for a total of 13 rows. So that's 1, 2, so we have 11 more repeats to do of this iris stitch all the way up, and once we've reached that point, we're ready to work our edging. So continue working your chain of 3 at the start of the row, turn your work, and then work your iris stitch into that chain 1 space. So your 2 double crochets, your chain 1 and a further 2 double crochets. Repeat that all the way along, working into each of these chain 1 spaces, and then work a double crochet into the top of that turning chain. And you need a total of 13 rows. So there's 1, 2, and we're working on row 3, and I'll meet you at the end of row 13 so that we can do our edging together. So I've just worked my last row, and I wanted to point out you're probably seeing the same thing as I am, and that is that this looks like a rectangle. I promise you it is not. Lay your square flat and just spread it out away from the top and the bottom. So pull the sides out a little bit, and ta-da, we have a square. The problem is when we're working these stitches, they want to go as tall as they can, and that means that it can be quite disillusioning when you see that actually your square looks like a rectangle. But sometimes you just need to put those squares into position. I am going to cover blocking. There are some squares in this event that will look an awful lot better when they are blocked, but this is not one of them. Don't you worry, once we've done the edging, it's going to remain in a square for this one, so it's nice and easy. So once you've got your 13 rows of the iris stitch, we are going to work our edging, and just like we have on our other blankets, we're going to start with a chain 1. We're not turning our work, and we're going to work straight into that space underneath that chain 1, and then work into each of the ends of the rows and into the chain spaces. Now this should give us a stitch count of 24 single crochets when we reach the end of working into each space and into the end of each rows. Why did I chain? No, we're working in there. That was why, wasn't it? So you see that little space there? We're going into that one as well. And we're just going to continue all the way down till we reach to our slip knot, and then we're going to work our corner. So continue working down at the end of each row and in that little chain space as well, and I'll meet you at that slip knot. So once I've worked into that space here, I'm back to my slip knot, and this is where I'm going to work my corner, where I work a single crochet, a chain one and another single crochet, all into that same space. And then we're going to work along the bottom of the other side of the chain, and we're just going to evenly work along, placing single crochets. So I'm going to work into this space here, and then over this one, and just continue to repeat that the whole way along. Make sure you're working in the bottom of those ones as well. Oops. Let's move that out of the way. There we go. Just going to pull that. Oh, that's a bit neater. And again, we're aiming for that same stitch count of 24 along the bottom. So we need to make sure that we're working into some of these chains as well. It's not just randomly placing them in any old space. I'm just looking for that nice and even look. So continue all the way across, and by here to the last one you should have 24 single crochets, and I'll meet you here for this corner. So once you have your 24 single crochets and you've reached your last chain here, we're going into the bottom of that chain 3. We're going to work our corner again. So we work one single crochet, a chain 1 and another single crochet into that corner, just to kind of bring us back round. And we're going to repeat what we did on the other side here by working along the ends of our rows. So we're going to work into that space first of all, and then work into the ends of each of these rows all the way up into the chain space, into the end of the rows, all the way up to the top. So continue working up, and I'll meet you ready for the last corner and to work across the top of row 13. So I've worked my stitches all the way up the ends of those rows, and I'm ready to work my last corner into that chain just at the corner there. And I'm going to work my one single crochet, a chain 1 and another single crochet there. Now to work across the top here, we're going to work into the top of each stitch and ignore those chain spaces, and that will give us the right stitch count all the way back to our first single crochet. So we're just skipping that chain 1 space in between and working across the top of the stitches. So keep working across, and I'll meet you over here. So I've just worked into the top of that last double crochet, and then I'm going to work into that the top of that final stitch to work my final corner. So of course we do that chain 1, a single crochet and another chain 1. That helps us turn ready to slip stitch into that first single crochet that we made, and we can do a little chain 1 to fasten off. I can locate my scissors. We can fasten off with a nice long end, and there we have our beautiful iris stitch square. Now I absolutely love the texture on this one. I mean, I love all of these squares that I've designed obviously, but this one is one of my favorites. I designed a top using the iris stitch earlier this year, and I absolutely love it. I'm hoping to put that one and do a full video tutorial for that one for next year. It's going to be a little bit of work, but yeah, I really hope that you've enjoyed making your iris stitch square. And of course, if you're taking part of the Hodgepodge blanket crochet along, I would love to see your completed square. You can come on over and post it in the community group or tag me on social media. I can't wait to see them. Now tomorrow I'm going to be back with another square design. I can't wait to share this one with you. It's another favourite of mine. They're all my favourites, don't tell anybody. But until then, let's deal with these pesky ends. Let's get them woven in, and I will see you tomorrow for another granny square pattern.